What's up, hobby friends and patrons, and welcome to my video log for the month of basically covering November and December, talking about what I worked on in October and November. I do apologize that my month of November basically just ended up being a shit show. A combination of things which I'll talk about in the first clip ahead, and I'm going to be using timestamps below. This video may end up running a little bit longer because there's a lot to cover and there's a lot I want to talk about. And if you want to skip ahead to some of the boring stuff to see the miniatures, just go ahead, timestamps, do the thing. So yeah, big overview. Stuff in October, stuff in November, got quite a lot done, and pretty much completed my 2,000 points of Space Wolves, plus a little extra, along with some Marvel miniatures. So let me cut the video right here. I'll talk about why November and to some extent October as well was kind of a shit show. And then I'll walk through all the miniatures and then talk about the rest of the year for December. And then what I'm going to be looking to do in 2026, as well as things I'm going to try and do to keep myself on track and accountable, really. So it's funny. It just occurred to me that I could take my webcam mic that I'm using for the palette and just flip it around to use for recording my face. Yeah, so basically, I think the past 2 months have been, or at least it's felt like it's been crazy long. So I think right around early mid-October, I had a mild case of shingles, and I went to the doctor, and basically he prescribed some medication for me that was supposed to help deal with the symptoms and the pain. It wasn't crazy big. It was like a small rash on my lower back here, like super localized, and it went away within like 2 weeks, and that's because of the medication. I didn't realize that the side effects of that medication would have such a huge impact on both, I guess, my productivity and my motivation, but as well my mental health. And so like I didn't realize it for the first like week when I started the medication, and so I went through this like what felt like a depressive rut. I was feeling very lethargic, unmotivated, and kind of just generally unhappy. And I couldn't quite identify what was happening or what was causing it. I wasn't sure if it was the weather, things that were going on in my life, if I was being stressed, or just weird anxiety stuff. I didn't really think for me to look into the side effects of medication or of the medication until a week afterwards. And I realized that literally all of my symptoms, like a lack of happiness, a lack of motivation or desire, were all a result of being on those meds. And so it did help for the tail end of October, leading into November, to understand the source of that. But it still didn't make it that much better because it still kind of sucked to have to mentally fight through that. The medication cycle was like 12 or 13 days, and when I finished it, it still took about a week to get out of my system, week and a half. And so I was slowly bringing myself back up emotionally. And so that impacted what I was feeling, how I was approaching all of my projects. It did help that I had my Space Wolves to work on. And so it was stuff I didn't have to record, didn't have to think through. It was just an assembly process, going through the steps, going through the motions. I could turn my brain off. And that gave me something to focus my mind off of. And so all of October leading into the start of November, my emotional state has just been like a complete disaster. And I'm only just starting to recover close to the end of November. In combination with that, in terms of just projects, I'm gonna be honest, pretty much anything that isn't 40K really hasn't been capturing my interest lately. I haven't played Marvel in like 3 or 4 months now. No Age of Sigmar. And we've pretty much all just been playing 40K. And I've also been playing in 2 simultaneous leagues, one more casual, one more competitive, as well as taking part in a few more tournaments. And then actually there is one, not a big tournament, they're all local stuff, like 1-day, 3-game events. But there is one in December 6th. So right now this is November 30th, so it's a Sunday. So this coming Saturday, there is a local tournament where I have been aiming to get my full 2,000 points of Space Wolves painted. I'm almost there. I've been making tweaks along the way. Where my list started 2 months ago when I started the league, and where I thought I wanted to play or how I wanted to play the game in 4K, how the game is actually played, how I actually want to play the army, and sort of where the army list has evolved up until now has meant that I've been painting and then not using stuff because I've been dropping it and changing my list, which has meant that I've painted close to about probably 2,400 points, 2,300 points of Space Wolves, and I actually have one more model to paint, which will make it 24, just because the list keeps changing. Um, I'll talk about it when I go through the Space Wolf stuff, but pretty much that's it. Working through the Marvel stuff has not been a chore. The models are great, but because I haven't been playing it and the game's been changing so much the past couple of months that I haven't had time to sit down and go through all the changes to play any of the games with the new rule set. And so I haven't really been motivated beyond my telling myself I need to get these models done for tutorials every month. So it has been a bit of a chore to try and pick up those models and sit through them and work through them, in combination with I want to get my Space Wolves done. I have this tournament at the end of November, start of December, and all the mental stuff I've been going through. So that, and then finally, I know this is like excuses hour with John. My wife and I do share an Adobe license, and because she uses a lot for her MLA, her Masters in Landscape Architecture, she's in her project crunch time right now, sort of all through the month of December, leading into all through the month of November, leading into December. And so when she's using the Adobe license on both her laptop and her computer, she bounces a lot between the different programs, and whatever her workflow means that I'm unable to use the Adobe license to do any editing. So while I did have some of my stuff for tutorials recorded like mid-November, I wasn't actually able to record or edit anything until pretty much the end of the month. And that includes the video log that I had recorded for the start of November. I couldn't get it edited and uploaded in time till now, hence why I'm just combining the two of them. So again, I apologize. October and then November especially has been a shit show for me, and I'll talk about it in one of the clips ahead. I think December is also going to be kind of a shit show, but I'm going to try and work around it and just plan for not trying to fit as much in and give myself more wiggle room. So, and I'm actually going to timestamp this and cut it as a separate clip because I think it is important to talk about when you're working through big projects or long-term projects where you're trying to budget and manage your time. For whatever reason, I'm really good with it at work, and anything not hobby related. But when it comes to hobby, because I want to do all these different things and I'm constantly taking on new projects, and like my attention gets jumped around between things that inspire me or I lose inspiration, which partly maybe it's not ADHD. I'm not diagnosed for it. I'm not diagnosed for autism either, but I definitely am on the spectrum a little bit. And I probably have some ADHD tendencies. So like I do notice that my motivation bounces around a lot. I lose interest, I gain interest very quickly. And I actively try and manage it, but sometimes it just gets away from me. What I need to get better at is budgeting my time for hobby projects. I need to learn to allot, or if I'm allotting a certain amount of time to do something, in all honesty, I probably need to double it because that's realistically how long it's going to take me. A lot of times I'm thinking, oh, I painted these 5 Marines in like 2 days or 3 days when I started the project. I can probably do the same thing repeatedly over and over again. And for the most part, for simple stuff like regular Marines or Scouts, it's true. But these more complex ones like the Head Takers, the Wolfen, the Thunderwolf Cav especially, they are taking a lot longer than I thought they would. And it definitely pushed this project over budget in terms of time. I think I was actually expecting to get the entire Space Army done by the end of October, and we're now 30 days behind. So that just shows you how unexpectedly complex some of these figures were. I think Logan as well took more time than I thought it would. So yeah, just I think if you're working through your own projects or budgeting your own time, just be cognizant of how long you think stuff will take, and then build in some buffer time, probably more than you need. And especially with something that's fun like this, that's a hobby where you're going to be pulled in so many different directions with things that do motivate you, or you're going to lose interest. New games pop up, games change, etc. You need to be adaptable. And then the other part is just imposing these deadlines while they are deadlines. I need to come to terms with the fact that they are just self-imposed, and that if I don't meet them, not the end of the world. It's good to work towards a goal, but sometimes falling short's okay, especially on something like this that doesn't impact my life in any meaningful way. It's not the end of the world, and I need to stop beating myself up over it, which actually happens quite a lot, which sometimes, especially with the medication I was on, put me in a bit of a deeper spiral because I would be feeling bad. I wouldn't finish something in time. I'd make myself feel even worse. I'd kick myself over it, and it just kept going in a vicious cycle. So here we are. So for the Spaceballs I painted in October, I did pretty much wrap up most of the basic infantry. I'll talk about when I go through the November Spacewolf stuffs, but like the rest of my Blood Claws, the Scouts, Bjorn, and then a couple of characters were fun to work on. Ragnar, always been one of my favorites, and he's actually the great company that my army is primarily built around. I do have Logan, so Company of the Great Wolf, and then when I do end up adding Wolfguard Terminators as well as Arjak, they will also be Company of the Great Wolf. I may have one Wolfguard Terminator squad for Ragnar. I'm undecided yet, but because I have the Head Takers as well as all my Thunderwolves as the Wolfguard for Ragnar, I think I'm okay having all the Terminators specifically for Logan. Ragnar being speed and aggression, Logan being the more stand your ground and sort of plod through and grind the enemy down. That's my headcanon, and I'm sticking with it. So, fun piece. I love that the sculptor kept all the elements of the original 3rd edition figure, but in a much more dynamic and realized pose. I did also end up painting Logan. Probably one of the best models that they've put out for any refresh, and I think this was one of the models that really pushed it over the top for me to dive into Space Wolves. When I picked up 40K again a couple of months ago, I was on the fence between a couple of different armies. I think Eldar was a second contender, which is why I'm doing Eldar for our painting thing in April. Talk about that later. But Space Wolves being one of my first armies, and all the new figures that they put out, just chef's kiss. Bjorn was one of the later additions to the army. I'm not sold on the size of the figure. I hate how tiny he is compared to all the newer dreadnoughts. There is an in-game advantage where he's fairly small, very easy to hide, very easy to slip into smaller gaps, but he's not impressive. He's not imposing. I wish that they had redesigned Bjorn bigger to match like a Redemptor size dreadnought, but using the box knot style. Because I love the actual design of the model. I just hate the scale of it. I did end up putting him into my list and dropping some units because I find that I need the command points in 40K because of how command point hungry I tend to play the game like. So, painted up some scouts. I originally wanted to use these as infiltrators, but ended up proxying them as Space Marine Scouts just because I love the uppy downy. They give me a lot of flexibility in move blocking, covering a bit of the board early on, and then I can uppy downy them every turn to play for board control and objectives. These models are fairly simple to work on, pretty much just the stock infiltrator models. All of them had skulls and skull and crossbones on the chest, so I shaved all those down just because I don't like that busy look. There's so much going on. I wanted to have a cleaner chest plate, and I just took a bunch of bare heads from the various Space Wolf kits and stuck them on. I ended up having to 3D print this rocket launcher, so the scale of it is a little bit off. Got some gorilla arms happening here, but you don't really notice it if you don't think about it. So finished up the last of my 5 blood claws. Pretty straightforward. Really fun to work on. All unique heads, unique recipes for the skin. And I'm actually a real fan of the pack markings. Such a simple color scheme, just the red and the yellow, but I think it really pops. And I don't know. This is probably my favorite unit in terms of just visually, because of how punchy the double yellow shoulder pads with the red is. And then the Wolfen. So the last few units I painted for my Space Wolves, the Wolfen, the Head Takers, and then the 6 Thunderwolves were all really complex models that took far longer than I thought they would. Even with sub-assemblies, especially on the Wolfen, there were a lot of issues I had where I think I should have sub-assembled them further. Lots of little nooks and crannies. I think gluing in the backpacks and the heads were a mistake. There was a lot that was exposed that could be seen, but couldn't be easily painted. And then the backpack especially, having it glued on because of the cabling meant that I really couldn't airbrush the gray separate from the skin, and there was a lot of masking and hand painting that had to be done. I think if I kept the backpack separate, I could have optimized that much better. Airbrushed the backpacks instead of hand painting them, airbrushed the skin instead of hand painting it, and I would have been able to get through them maybe at least a day or two faster. I'm glad they're done. I did end up dropping them from my current 2,000 point list, but depending on where the edition goes next year, I have a Stormlance list in mind that's kind of a copy of Michael's from Art of War 40k. So I'm going to need 15 more of these. Hashtag my life is going to suck. Overall, though, pretty fun unit to look at, like once you get them fully painted. When you see the original models on the box art, they have the dual hand weapon, and the poses for all of them are very Ginyu Force. They don't look dynamic, they don't look imposing or cool, and I've really hated them. But there's no real good alternative, and I already have 9 3D printed Thunderbolts. I didn't want to also 3D print the Wolfen. I felt like that would be a bridge too far for too many unofficial models. So I just sucked it up. But when you build up the hammer and shield variant, they actually look pretty good. They've all got decent running poses. There's nothing awkward about them. They're just charging forward and swinging their hammers. So I think overall, like the hammer shield variant, in addition to being just better in the game, they are just better models overall. I also worked on the Exodus, Avalanche, and Lady Mastermind kit from Marvel in October. These are really fun models, very simple in the sense that they are not covered in frilly details. They're mostly just suits and skin. Exodus had a little bit more detail on him, but because I sub-assembled the cape as well as all the different elements of the flame, I was actually able to get through a lot of it with the airbrush before coming in hand painting some final details and highlights, and then spending all my time working on his suit and in particular the head. With my Space Wolves, I've been focusing a lot on painting skin in a non-linear recipe. And what I mean by that is not taking the same recipe over and over again of like, here's a base coat, go through 3 fixed highlights with different colors, and then a shade, some glazes, and that's like the same recipe over and over and over again. I've been really pushing myself to mix and match different colors to work through different tonal variations, different palettes, to try and get a variety of skin tones and approach it in a more not abstract or theoretical, but a more free-form way. So it's like I'll grab a random brown, some random reds, maybe some yellows or like a peach tone, and just mix and match the variety to try and work through building better skin recipes and approach to skins. Because then I can take that learning and change the colors or the tones depending on the skin tone I'm trying to achieve, using that knowledge as like a foundation. So like I think Exodus is a perfect example of, oh, how do I paint a more orangey tan skin? Well, I can just take the browns and shift it more to like an orangey red. The purples I use will shift a little bit more towards the blue side for the cooler tone. Things like that. And I think I've definitely improved in my skin painting a lot over the past couple of months as a result of my actively pushing to, yeah, just expand the way that I'm approaching painting skin and in particular faces. Always been a particular weakness of mine, and I think I'm at a very comfortable spot now painting faces after having painted like 50 of them across the entire army. While we're talking about Marvel, so here's what I worked on for November. So we have Luke Cage, and then we have Namor. So I will be uploading the tutorials for these simultaneously with this vlog, and that'll be for the month of November. And then I'm hoping to get some more Marvel done for December, but it'll depend on how long this commission takes. So again, just continuing that conversation. So really pushing the limits of skin or my knowledge of skin and how to paint it. I'm super happy with how this turned out. Painting darker skin tones, well, like black skin is always a particular challenge, and using references is always helpful. I think it's still a bit of a struggle, so I may push myself to paint more black skin in the months ahead. But even this it was a one take. I didn't have to redo the entire recipe as I typically do sometimes, where I'll pick a few colors, think that's how I want to paint it, ends up looking bad and have to redo it. Luke Cage was a one pass, and I think I'm happy with it. I want to explore a variety of them and see how I can approach painting black skin tones using different colors. And then Namor, I mean, what's say the my only issue with this sculpt is that I think the muscles are a little bit too defined, too sharp. It's almost like if you ever look at bodybuilders who compete when they're on the stage, how all the muscles are defined in that sense, it's because they're super dehydrated. And all the skin is just like shrunken in like saran wrap, and everything is like unhealthily hyper defined. And that's how I feel the sculpt is for Namor. I think they might have used a bodybuilder like musculature for reference and forgot that regular people who are hydrated and healthy don't look like that. So I had to fight the sculpt a little bit. I was successful in some areas. I think in some areas it still ended up being a little bit too heavy for the shadowing, but the problem is you still see the shadow even when the model's painted. And so I'm like, you know what, I'll just whatever, lean into it, make it a style thing. Fairly happy with how it turned out. I think there's a little bit too much purple. Purple and like this rosy red tone. Almost like there's a color, rose red from AK, which I didn't use at all. Or brown rose, sorry. Brown rose skin tone. And it's great for mixing, not as just like a base skin tone. And there's a hint of it in the shadows, which I'm not 100% happy with, but I don't want to repaint all of the skin either because I think the front especially looks fantastic. So I'm going to leave it, send it, yeah. So for the month of November for Space Wolves, I've worked on head takers. So I got 6 of them, along with 6 Thunderwolves, and I painted my counts as Calidus as well. When I was approaching these, I figured, oh, half of them is covered in fur and cape. Shouldn't be that bad, right? I figured maybe if I double the time that it would take a regular Space Marine to account for the cape and the fur, plus all the little extra details, not that bad. I mean, the 6 of them still ended up taking close to 2 weeks. So, you know, shit. I do like how they turned out. So I'm pretty happy with that. And I think, especially on the tabletop, I love how they play. They're a great blender unit. I currently have them, or had them, as 2 3-man squads with tiny hunting wolf packs for objectives. But I found that the MSU approach for the head takers just doesn't work. They're a great missile, but oftentimes they don't have the volume to kill what they're going into unless it's like a really light chaff unit. And so I've adapted the list a little bit. So I do need to paint up a wolf priest, which I'll talk about in a second, and make them a little bit more effective. My list has been jigged around probably at least like 7 or 8 times now because I've been losing a lot of my games, pretty much because I don't have the tools and my original list sucked. I went very MSU and I had a bunch of units that just didn't pull their weight. And I found that for how killy the game of 40k is right now, bigger, stronger hammers that are actual threats can do more than 3 little head takers coming in through a flank that just don't do a whole lot. I have a Vanus assassin from Forge World that I've painted as a Calexis. Played a few games with it, but then dropping her immediately because I will be combining the head takers for Wolf Priest. And then Thunderwolves. Sorry, been talking a lot, so my throat's still a little dry. So conceptually, I hate Thunderwolves. I hate the idea of a Space Marine riding a wolf, and then the original models, especially from Games Workshop. The scale of them, it's very goofy, and I don't like them, which is unfortunate because they're probably one of the best units in the Space Wolf Codex. They're cheap, durable, fast. They're a fantastic skirmishing unit. They don't do a whole lot of damage, but they're great to just draw attention, do objectives. They can sometimes sit on a primary and score points and live long enough to actually score the points without being taken off of it. So I currently have, or I originally had 1 unit of 3 in my list just because, I'll take them. Great on paper. I can compromise and have one unit in my list. Again, turns out they're really good. I ended up having to add 2 more units of 3 for my current list, which again did increase the amount of time that the army ended up taking. These ones were actually a little bit faster than how long it took me to paint the original 3 Thunderwolves. The first 3 I painted, I ended up priming them white because I was using contrast paint to do all the fur on the Thunderwolf. But it did mean that I have to go back in, black line or brown line every other detail before painting it. And in combination with having to repaint the fur anyways, because the contrast just didn't take as well. This fur isn't as well sculpted as the fur pelts on the new models or the Fenrisian wolves. And so I still end up having to go back in and hand paint and highlight every single tuft of fur. So I figured with these Thunderwolves, I might as well just prime them black to a 2-tone brown from the get-go and just paint them up that way. So they were actually a lot faster than the first 3. I think the first 3 ended up taking about 7 or 8 days. And I ended up taking about 8 or 9 days for these 6. So I did cut off about 3 or 4 days, a lot faster. It did help. I also chose to build them with regular Intercessor backpacks and not the 3D printed ones I had before, which had a lot more detail in them. Yeah, like sculpted for pelts and axes and totems and trinkets and stuff, skulls, lots of little things that just took way too much time, which did balloon the painting time. Okay, so looking ahead for December, again, that tournament is in a week, and because of the changes to the list, I need a Wolf Priest. So I picked up an Execrator yesterday, and I've done some base coats and an oil pass on this, so he'll be cured probably within a day or 2, and then I can go and actually hand paint them and do all the highlighting stuff and hopefully have them done in time for the tournament on Saturday. My changes to the list means that putting him in a big block of head takers is effectively a free lance strat, whatever it's called, honor the chapter, I don't even know. But basically, +1 to wound natively on the head takers means I'm not spending CP to make them hit harder. And along with regenning a model every command phase, if they don't get wiped, it makes them a legitimate threat. And that gives me a couple more units to actually fight with, not just Ragnar and the Blood Claws, which I found would kill something really, really well and then die immediately. Having the 6 head takers with the Wolf Priest gives me just another legitimate threat instead of tiny MSU skirmishing units that can just like kill chaff. I can have a brick that can kill something heavier. So I know for sure I need to work on this coming week. I also have a commission project that I got contacted for about a week ago, and they're requiring it rushed. So they want it done before the holidays, which means that the first couple of weeks of December, I will be working on that exclusively and will be unable to paint anything for myself or recording anything. So I'm hoping if I can get that through quickly, then I can try and fit personal projects in through the remainder of December. I know I still want to do a display board for my wolves, so chances are that will be the thing that I work towards, and the video that I produce for the last month of the year will be display board focused. But beyond that, I don't know what I'll be able to do. So I apologize if my content and production for December is lower or low, but thank you for supporting me and bearing with me. And then just briefly touching on 2026 then. So we're doing another guys getaway in April, probably end of March, early April, and the game is going to be 40K. So I will be painting up a spirit host army for Eldar. So basically as many Wraith Lords and Wraith Guard, Wraith Blades as I can fit in, smaller, and that'll give me a core Eldar army that I can then expand on for either Aspect Host or Wind Rider Host, depending on how the edition pans out next summer and what I want to be playing. Because we're not going to Adepticon, I'm not going to be painting anything for competition, and that'll give me more time to focus on both the Eldar as well as just working through my backlog. So I still want to finish up my Seraphon. That's definitely a project that needs to get done, and I have a whole pile of Marvel models that I do want to finish up by the end of the year. And I think I'm going to keep 2026 focus very narrow. Seraphon, Eldar, and Marvel. I'm going to do my best to not take on new projects, especially big ones, and we'll go from there. Yeah, so I think I'll wrap it up there. Thank you so much for your support and for your understanding for the past couple of months. I hope you're all having wonderful holidays and enjoying the rest of the year. We just got our first big snowfall of December, so yay. Yep, until next time, happy holiday.